What it is, what it was, what it shall be. We're back again. Today's video, Spirit War Bootcamp number 108, and this is called 1947 Ultra Woo. How's everyone doing? I'm so grateful to my followers listening to my ramblings. I learned a lot by making these videos, and I'm hoping it's inspiring. So, 1947 Ultra Woo. This is actually a perfect continuation of our previous video. So a lot of crazy shit happened in 1947, and it seems like a lot of the things that happened then are circling back around today, dealing mainly with, Roswell incident, so-called. I don't necessarily believe that has anything to do with what we're being told about it, but they chose this time in a specific way. The nation of Israel was very recently created, 1947. Air Force, U.S. Air Force created 1947. National Security Act, 1947. Death of Aleister Crowley, 1947. What if all these are related? So a lot of crazy shit, but let's go back. Let's go back and talk about the previous video. So I know I made some really incendiary claims that I'm sure anyone could sit and try to critique, when I'm saying that, the Freemasonic institution is going back to the 1500s, dealing with invocation of non-corporeal intelligences called the Enochian angels, the Enochian ethers, and so on. This is something that Crowley himself went to do, to reenact for himself in Algiers, I think. Any rate, so let's talk about why I say that. Why do I say that the Masonic order is all about these, what they believe as Nephilim and these disincarnate physical entities that are non-physical entities that they're trying to engage in possession with or communication with? How can I say that? Well, let's go back in the past to the book of Enoch. Interestingly, Enoch wasn't taken seriously. It had been largely dismissed until, guess what year? 1947. That's the other thing that happened that year was the discovery publication of the Qumran Nag Hammadi scrolls, right? Which featured what archaeologists are telling us is the earliest, oldest versions of the book of Enoch, which predates almost all the other books of the Bible, some of the scripture that they found. So Enoch gets a big boost in 1947, right at the time where they're having so-called alien contact, crash retrieval, reverse engineering program all sparking off, right? And of course, Crowley, who famously claimed to commune with something called Lamb, which is basically depicted by him as a gray alien, same kind of shit going on, and he dies that year. So that's an interesting coincidence. But let's talk about what's this whole thing with the Nephilim and the fallen angels. How does that all connect? So the book of Enoch talks about he's the only human in the Bible other than Methuselah, I think, who is directly, and maybe if you believe in Jesus, right, who is taken directly from the surface of the earth to the godly realms without the normal death process, right? So Enoch, he's a seventh generation from Adam, immediately pre-flood or post-flood, and so, so he's seventh generation from Adam, basically, and so that's why the seventh degree, I think it's the Yorkite seventh degree, is called the Royal Arch of Enoch. Pretty interesting. So if you think about it, an arch, right, has an apex. And if you think about the firmament or the dome or whatever, it's often depicted like an arc or an arch. That's why we have archangels, right, and so on like that. That's why we have architectural domes. So the architecture. So anyways, this Royal Arch of Enoch represents the point of ascension from human form into these celestial realms. And he goes from Enoch to becoming Metatron, which means the staff of God. A lot of people say that has to do with death. Like meta means death, which is true, it does. But meta with an H is a staff. Just like Moses had a staff that he could turn into a serpent and so on like that. So, you're trying to ascend this like spiral staircase. And you could think of the staircase as a staff, like your spinal column, or like the pillar of Osiris, the Jed pillar, right? So this is what Enoch represents, is human ascension. And so it's an interesting story about all that. But in a way, Enoch is the opposite of Cain. If you think about it, they have this first supercomputer built by the U.S. government was called ENIAC, which is Cain backwards. So you're turning Cain into Enoch, right? So Cain means to fall, to descend, to be downcast. That's Cain, the fallen ones. That's why Canaan, the Canaanites and the Canaan, they rule the shore. Like they have this big Lebanese, Tyre, Sidonian shore, which is like a massive naval base for the whole Mediterranean. And, they have harbors there going back thousands of years, and they're still usable. So it puts all this kind of sea level rise bullshit to lie. The same, there's other ports, I think Accra and stuff like that. There's ports that are thousands of years old and they're not having any kind of sea level disruption problems. So something to think about. Anyway, so, and of course Hiram of Tyre, he was a Canaanite, right? He was from the low-lying lands or the fallen lands, and that's why I have the Cana bush. Because if you're gonna have pirates and boats, you got to have a shit ton of cannabis to make all your ropes and sails out of. So wherever the pirates are, there's tons of ganj. Same with Cyprus, right? There's lots of ganj. They can't exist without it, really. So it's an interesting connection. But if you look at Cain and Enoch and how those words are connected, and Cana bush or Enoch bush, right? Just throwing that out there. So anyway, this happens. Okay, so Enoch sees the fallen angels. Like he's presented and shown the fallen angels imprisoned in Tartarus, or whatever you want to call it, the underworld or submarine ocean floor or something. They're the fallen ones that were destroyed in the deluge are all imprisoned. And so how did the fallen ones become the fallen ones? Well, they rebelled against God and descended on Mount Hermon, which is, guess what, 33 degrees north latitude. Interestingly, so that's the pact of the fallen angels was there. There's still a big shrine there called Qasr Antar, which is relating to the star Antares. And this is sacred in both the Islamic, tradition and interestingly, good old Epstein had a piece of the cloth that would cover the Kaaba, the holy Mecca stone, right? The black stone, black cube. He has a little piece of the cloth called the Qibla. But one of the things that's written on that cloth is this ancient epic Arabic poetry about Antar, who was a great warrior, slave warrior, right? And he fought for love. Crazy thing. But, a lot of people never contemplate anything related to that. But so there's some kind of connection between Antar, this Kaaba, and the peak of Mount Hermon, which is at 33 degrees north latitude. Interestingly, a lot of this came to light when a Scottish Masonic dude called James Bruce went to try and discover the source of the Nile and found 3 copies of Ethiopic Enoch, which was the oldest version that had never been translated and into English and that hadn't ever been read by any of the Brits. I'm kind of into hyperstition. Like my whole theory has always been, what if these are just fan fiction that's trying to steer the course of humanity through propaganda and to implant programming into their minds? But let's look at the programming of our adversary, right? The Masonic butt sex pedo cult. Right? So they take inspiration from Mount Hermon and 33. That's why they have 33 degrees of initiation in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. It's for 33 north latitude of Mount Hermon. Guess what's out at Mount 33? The first Scottish Rite temple in all of North America. The earliest, oldest one was at Charleston, South Carolina, which is 33 north latitude as well. The place where JFK was shot, 33 north latitude. White Sands, New Mexico, and Roswell, New Mexico, 33 north latitude. And finally, Disneyland, 33 north latitude. So that's not an accident. And also, of course, at Disneyland, you have Club 33 to commemorate the occasion. And of course, we know, a lot of people know that Walt Disney was a gay Mason pedo and the Order of Demolay, Masonic pedo dude who used to make child prawn at his studio. And he was the informant for the FBI trying to rat out different parts. He was like the Epstein of Hollywood back then. And yeah, his ops are still going on, of course. But so why do they have this whole thing with 33? What's up with Qasr Antar, this holy temple at the top of Mount Hermon? Well, there's a Greek inscription there on a stone that was found that mentions the oath that was taken by the fallen angels to solidify and swear to their rebellion against God. And so, interestingly, the Scottish Rite Freemasons all worship the fallen angels, and they are trying to gradually initiate you up the spinal column or up the Jed pillar to the Royal Arch of Enoch, right? This is their spiel. This is their story that they want to tell everybody about. And why is that? What is that group really about? So now let's go back to the 1947 Enigma. Now that I've given more context for the previous video, let's go to 1947. Fast forward, Qumran Caves, we find the Book of Enoch. Roswell, New Mexico crash supposedly happens. NSA, National Security Act, the Air Force is created. We see the earliest formation of the State of Israel somewhat prior, like maybe 1946, 47, right? So all these things are all happening. So if you, in a way, you could say that our whole world order that we're living in now was created at that time. And a lot of it had to do with the assassination of JFK. And with, it's often been speculated that he had classified information about some kind of space shit. And so, the rocket cultists, L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons, who were devotees of Crowley, who died that year, had gone and carried out rituals in the desert to invoke the spirit of Babylon, amongst other things. And were basically, and so if you look at the immediate successors of Crowley, such as Kenneth Grant and so on, he's all about the space fiction and the Cthulhu mythos and all that shit. And getting into this other dimensional, like a sci-fi layer to the whole occult trip that's beyond everything else. And it's about what the Cthulhu mythos, about this like deep sea prison called the City of Ryla, where all the old gods are imprisoned, which in a way it's an Enochian legend. And interestingly, Lovecraft himself was a Masonic initiate at or his dad rather, was a Masonic initiate at the Ionic Lodge there in the East Coast as well. So again, we have another Masonic connection with this whole alien fiction god thing. And he was obsessed with fish people. He has a whole book, or a whole short story or novella or whatever you want to call it, about this town where all the people have been hybridized with some kind of Leviathan sea creature, Quinator, Merovingian mythos, sea monster, So that's kind of weird fiction. And he himself was an odd-looking dude. He looked kind of mutated. Some people think he had Marfan syndrome, but he had an extremely elongated skull, as you could see just by looking at any pictures of his massive fucking scoliosis. It's a swollen skull. But anyway, this is interesting to me. I find it very interesting. And we're looking at this whole thing right now where we're dealing with all this so-called disclosure pertaining to these topics. And to me, I'm always thinking about how right along this 33 latitude, there was a lot of Nazi German mathematicians and scientists that were brought over to the United States. And a lot of them were involved in these exact kind of black ops, like special access programs, etc. And of course, L. Ron Hubbard built a giant underground bunker very near this 33 latitude out there, very close to where Epstein's Zorro Ranch is also at in New Mexico, very close to the 33rd parallel. And interestingly, if you look on that L. Ron Hubbard's secret deep underground base where he buried all his gold tablets of his writings, if you look, there's a geoglyph of two circles overlapping, creating a Vesica Pisces with little, they would be called like lozenges. It's like a stretched quadrilateral, like a stretched out, like a diamond shape, they always call it. So it's a Vesica Pisces with two diamond shapes. So what does that represent? Well, to me, I think of it as this so-called mundane terrestrial plane that we exist in, and this kind of mirror dimension, 4D space, if you will, non-time, where these other entities exist. You could think of it like, okay, they're from the future or whatever, or another dimension, or they're moving at a different time rate than us. But whatever it is, they call this the gifting fields because they've been finding a lot of fragments of tech. This is their story. This is the narrative that's been put out over the years, is that they have these gifting fields of their tech. And so L. Ron Hubbard wanted to go make a big geoglyph to try to get some of it gifted in right next to his deep underground military bunker that's also there for the Trementina base. Okay, so then you got good old Epstein at the Zorro Ranch. He's collecting pieces of the Kaaba tapestry and old death bells from a Catholic church and weird petroglyphs from out of the desert. So he's building a ritual space. And one of the things that was out there was a series of nested circles. It was a mandala. It was basically like a what do you call it? Like a telluric mandala or something, which is that's cool. Like I would like to do something like that. I don't really like the motives, but what was he doing out there? Why did he build that thing? Well, he was trying to crossbreed humans in some crazy way and to do some genetic engineering and all. That's kind of assumed. He was doing some probably human sacrifices. There's supposedly a lot of corpses, or there's a lot of testimony that there's corpses out there as well. I personally think it's highly probable that those people, the jerky, they talk about the jerky and the cream cheese, and I think they're really into human hormonal secretions, and that's one of the reasons why they have sex rituals, and they collect it, as well as a lot of blood flow too. They collect it and they ingest it. It's part of their bizarre Kabbalah pedo-Masonic sex cult that they have. And, Hubbard, Epstein, U.S. military, Black Ops, Majestic 12, whatever you want to call it, they're all doing stuff. They're in a parallel, what do they call it, a breakaway civilization. So they're not subject to the laws that we are. They don't have the bounds on them that we have, so they can do all this illegal research, potentially unethical research, try to rip the fabric of space-time and transit between dimensions, like these two overlapping circles that form the Vesica Piscis, which interestingly is also in Washington, D.C., surrounding the Washington Monument, which also, if you look at it from above, it's like a square within this Vesica Piscis, so it looks very similar, but the one in Trementina base is double. And so there's two, if you imagine, instead of just one. There's two overlapping circles, and there's two little pylons, or what do they call those fucking things? I'm losing my mind. Not pylons, monolith? No. Anyway, you know what the Washington Monument is. I forget the name of it because I'm having a brain fart. But anyway, Cleopatra's Needle. Anyway, we all know what it's called, but I'm having a senior moment. Anyway, they built that there and that's, they line it up with the presidential inauguration, because that's what I said. They're overlapping two different things. They're trying to invoke the spirit of Osiris under a giant pentagram into this president. They're inaugurating, so they're having this Nephilim spirit like drill itself into president and call him Osiris or something like that. That's why we have green military uniforms, because green is the color of Osiris, the fertility god. It's the color of the Wadjet. It's there's a lot of important things about that people never talk about, but it ties into this Masonic deal. They're kind of an Osiris Isis mystery cult, amongst other things. They incorporate a lot of that symbolism, including the Akasha tree, which supposedly creates a near-death experience for the initiate, so that they can expand their awareness and start to see over the two overlapping field energies. That's why they have the black and white tiles, right? I think of it as the white tiles are what I would call an implosive torsion vortex, and the black tiles are a compression implosion vortex, and the reason you have those is to go up and down between dimensions. And if you stand in between them and equilibrate, it creates a third. It's like a binaural beat or whatever. It's a binaural frequency of your spinal fluids pulsations and stuff like that. And so this is what they do, and they engage in that over many centuries. And so they use this as a divination, if you will, or communing with these other realities, right? And the way they try to basically bait, it's like fishing in the spirit world, right? Just how all the so-called Nephilim, the fallen ones, were destroyed by God in the flood. They were drowned in the flood, but their spirits are immortal, so they are still kind of trapped in the little geocosm here, and they're trying to take over other bodies. And usually human bodies, because like, yeah, the process wears on the body really hard. So they know that, and that's why they kind of get that's where the pedo grooming comes in. It's because they bring in the young boys to assume the god forms for them, because they know they don't want to harm themselves, right? And then they get the juice out of that in their own little sick way. That's kind of what they're all about. It's a grooming thing, you know? And so they know how to identify initiates and mediums and what they call sensitives. They can spot them. They have a good location protocol to find them and seek them out. And have a incremental system of enculturating them into this sick cult. And they took over a long time ago. Like, you go back to like all these kings of Europe going back in the day, Frederick and all these, like, the really occult monarchs, right? The occult monarchs of Europe, like they're the Illuminati kings of Europe. And they've been running some kind of crazy, like, Bene Gesserit style breeding program to produce a super god and a bunch of, like, one super god and 30 million slaves. But the super god doesn't want to kick it with them, because they're like, only the evil god really wants to even be around their dark energy, right? The super god really is. But they have free will. That's the crazy thing. So if you think about all these old Greek stories about the demigods and the titans, like, if you think about Jason and the Argonauts, like, that dude was not a good dude. He was just an ass-kicking weirdo, and he had a drug witch. This drug witch would hook him up and help him and she did most of the heavy lifting. He was just there as like a showpiece or whatever. But they both got destroyed by their witchy pirate ways in the end, just like Ghislaine and Epstein. Like, they think they're living high on the hog or whatever, but it's like they're destroying them, and they're creating a hell stream of karma. That's why I'm glad to be a simulation or a Buddhist, like, who's outside of the fucking Babylon paradigm. Like, I can't imagine being inside that worldview that they've programmed everyone. It's a suicidal form of slavery and exploitation by the Hasidic, what do you call them, Chabad Lubavitch, or whatever, these Sabbatean Masonic pedo cult that runs USA, Mexico, Argentina. Come on, man. Who's taking over? The 47 Club is running game on the rest of the world. Because they have, and I'm not endorsing this, but I'm just trying to explain it to people, because I don't want people to be victimized by it. So I'm trying to break it down and explain it, and explain why all the things that are happening in this world are going and who's doing them. The ultimate lesson is that we're in hyperstition. So this is a term that was used by the CCRU and these, like, accelerationists, the dark enlightenment people that Thiel and Elon Musk are all into, right? They're Sabbateans. It's like a techno-Sabbateanism, right? And so they're continuing the thread of this dark 33 Masonic pedo slave Jesuit Chabad text, right? Like, the brilliant phrase comes from Robert Anton Wilson. He says they're immanentizing the echelon. So the eschaton, rather. They're immanentizing the eschaton. So what does that mean? They're trying to bring about the end of the world by writing a play about it, a script, a barbaric hell script that just is like a loosh harvesting, energy harvesting thing for them. And it also steers the timeline into their desired dystopic pedo hellscape of Club 33. Like, you don't have to live in that reality. That's the great thing about these other religions, is that you learn that it's all bullshit. I mean, the whole material reality that we exist in is temporary. It's just fleeting, evaporating right in front of our eyes. Like, so rather than clinging to that, you can learn about this immortal cycle. Like, this is where the Nephilim and everybody, they're living on non-time. They're just playing. This is like a game simulation for them, and they can interface with this reality remotely, if you will. Like, they can pilot not only humans, any kind of creature. right? Because if you think about it, our whole body runs upon an intelligent vibrational energy, right? That comes to us through our breathing, through our blood pressure, and so on. We have this just energy coil that's just oscillating, that keeps us alive, right? And that's what animates us. That's what gives us all our intelligence, our sense perceptions, our creativity, our physical motion power, and our precision power comes from this electrostatic field. Everything that we really identify with at the deepest level is really coming from this non-material space, which pre-exists and post-exists our physical existence, right? And they know, like the Dark Black Lodge, like they know exactly what I'm saying, and they teach it. They teach it in a certain way. They teach it in this really traumatic way that conditions the person so that the flexion of their superhuman and super mundane skills is only under the tight hedonistic control of this top-down hierarchy that's always associated with trauma, and it's never associated with true bliss or freedom. It's always associated with trauma bonding into the cult. And so, and they can be switched on and off. That's what all the MK Ultra and all the fucking, post-traumatic PTSD. That's why Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, they all knew about PTSD, and even Jose Silva. Like they were already thinking. These are all military men who are all thinking about how the human body is electrostatic device, right? Like Jose Silva was a TV repairman, and he suddenly came up with this whole system. It's called Silva Mind Method or Silva Mind Control, right? Where you program yourself, and by doing so, you program your whole experience of reality, right? And so, and of course Dianetics too. He has the e-meters, right? He's trying to leverage this tech world, in a way like he's onto something, but in another way he's only using it to create, sleeper agents or whatever at best, or just menial slaves that will work for free for 10,000 years in a contract to be in the Sea Org, right? Again, the sea, they're always about the sea, because that's where they drowned the Nephilim. All the trapped spirits of the Nephilim are deep under the ocean. That's why Maxwell's got to take Stephen Hawking down there in the submarine and fucking all this kind of shit going on, looking for Terra Mara and Atlantis and the Bimini Road and all that kind of shit. It's a religion. They're in a Sabbatean religion. Okay, it's made up by them, but the realm in which we exist is hyperstitial. So you can create reality through fiction. And that's what all these secret groups are doing. They create a fiction, present it out, and they propagate it out into the masses. And so if you're like L. Ron Hubbard, Dianetics, or Steven Spielberg, like you get the pass to like propagate hella, right? There's so many replications of all their shit and their programming, and that gives it power, and that causes it to replicate and to spread. And if you think about this Book of Enoch, whether that's real or not, or whether it's a fan fiction that was created in 1947 to spawn 1 billion shitty YouTube videos, like, anyway, I'm trying to give you the real story and show you the continuity, okay? There's no line between what we think of as the ancient past and the technological future. There's a through line that goes perfectly through them, right? They're all connected. Military intelligence, entertainment system, education system, science and technology, futuristic understanding of interdimensionality and human energy capacities. Like these things are all one seamless thing. Beyond religion, beyond science, beyond government, beyond any of that. It's like reality engineering, okay? That's the real level. And these groups are powerful because they realize that, and they're inculcating the leveraging and utilization of that function to build a death cult that's very powerful, like a military army of the Jesuit order, something like that. It's like creating reality, like spreading it and creating this like iron lattice of fucking, field of this trap for us, right? You don't have to participate. The more you learn about what they're doing and how not to fall into it and how to recognize, because they just have, there's a one trick pony. They just do one thing forever. That's what gives them strength. They have the reptilian brain, like they always say. They have the reptilian brain. And so they got zero creativity, but their persistence and instinctual dominance is like unflinching, right? They're not compromised by the types of emotions that we have. But if you look back into the 1947 Enigma at the interface between these occult theorists, these high-tech aerospace scientists, right, and the modern media empire, like you see the line there, that's the program that's being sold to us right now, every day, and it's all a big production. So you got to question whether you really want to be involved in it or whether you think it might be more advantageous to opt out. And the thing is, these Sabbateans and these Freemasonic cults, right, they're just ripping off other people's shit, like the Greek magical papyri, some kind of Canaanite magic of the Chaldeans or something like that. And you know, wherever they go, they're always picking up more shit, you know, like a tumbleweed or or a snowball, right? That's why they incorporate the religions of wherever they go. So what they're capitalizing on and trying to inculcate is just a, you know, trademarked copyright version of, and low watered down, like low power version of spirituality. But you can go to the source, right? And there's many diverse sources that are appealing to different types of people and with different personality types, you know. And so, but even that, this is my thing. And as being a true Buddhist, like I believe in voidness, like whatever teachings you obtain, it's got to be let go. That's not really the truth. It's like a means to an end to like make you progress in a certain way. You know, it's not like there's some kind of absolute truth created by God from the sky. Like there'd be no point to life if everything's all predetermined and it's fascistic like that. What's the point of doing anything? You know, what's the point of making any kind of decisions? Because you have no free will in that scenario. So that's hella boring and not fun. So what I'm proposing instead is that we all start collectively flexing on this domain of human potential to create reality by seeding these extra dimensional, you know, time loops. It's the thing I keep coming back to. Like you're seeding both the past and the future through your actions. It's trippy to think about. You could think about it like a toroid. All right? You got explosive toroid and you got implosive toroid. One's backwards travel time, one's forwards travel time. And they both intersect at where we are. And this has been depicted in the mystical systems a lot of different ways. You could argue that this is what Yakin and Boaz, the two pillars of the Masonic Lodge, is really about. It's like a past, it's a retro time and a pro time, right? Like a forward time and backward time, basically. And this is why Crowley, for instance, taught all his disciples to do everything backwards. He's like, you should learn to walk backwards, talk backwards. There's this video of George Bush where they ask him about the skull and bones. And he says, forwards, he says, I can't talk about it. And backwards, if you listen to his voice backwards, it says, I never reveal ever. So he says it in both directions coherently. So he's learned the skill of this backwards talking, right? And I'm sure he's not the only one. But what this does is it's one simple, and another good thing is to learn to do everything ambidextrous. Like I was doing this when I was studying medicine, as I was taking notes with right hand and left hand every time. And when it was something that was going really slow, where I thought this is going to be boring as fuck, and I already know most of this shit, I started taking notes with my left hand to make it more interesting, to make it more challenging, right? So, but the point is, you can attain this type of facility, and this is where you're going to gain true intelligence, you're going to gain higher faculties, and this is the safe and healthy way to basically get into all these types of developmental architectures without going down the dark path. You know what I mean? And so the more that we all kind of realize this dynamic and get involved with it, the better everything's going to be, because it's going to create diversity of outcomes instead of just a grand narrative of like fascistic control, one world order. Anyway, this has been the 1947. I could do these for 8 hours easy, no problem. But this has been the 1947 Enigma Super Woo, and we'll continue in the next one.